The factual world can always change. The factual world must always change. You can put this, if you'd like to have point out, in the context of the unique position within a limited reality. And we're not speaking science fiction theory right here. Limited reality by, according to your five senses, we're dealing with a three-dimensional world. So within its unique position, we have the factual world, the intellectual world of man. Now, in the factual world, the situation is that it can change as opposed to other possible worlds, such as the primary. But not only can it change, the factual world must change. And thus you have that, in a sense, that befuddles the ordinary mind, but which to a revolutionist is just as plain as Wonder Bread, white bread, warm milk, a herd of snakes in your bed. You remember that guy? And what we have, once you see it, is the primary world changes as per its own schedule and agenda. While, on the other hand, the factual world changes only through man. Now, talking about changes, which is simple enough if you see it, but talking about any change in the primary world is not really any part of the bailiwick of this sort of activity. It is really of no great consequence within one person's lifetime, because to talk about changes in the primary world, you normally would be left with speaking about matters geologically, politically. That is, if you're going to talk about what, in the broadest sense, could be changes within your lifetime, which, if we're speaking about you being, from an ordinary viewpoint, an ordinary intellect, then the only thing that interests you is your lifetime. So any possible change in the primary world is not in man, not per se. That is, not tangibly in man, such as within one person's lifetime, changes happen at the primary level in man such that men grow a new liver, one that they can, detachable perhaps, that they can clean out and take around the bars with them. Men do not grow another arm, another leg. Zoologically, you do not have, normally outside of bacteria perhaps, if you're going to consider that sentient beings, but you do not have great change like that. If you're talking about change even at the primary level in the widest possible connotation of our use of these divisions of primary and secondary, you're talking about earthquakes, you're talking about volcano eruptions, you'd be talking about catastrophes. And it's of no great consequence to the individual. And on top of that, any sort of, there was a Cairo one time about this not too long ago, but anytime you have somebody attempting to do predictions in the primary world, surely you people don't need it. But if you met someone who seemed otherwise to be insightful or interesting or at least safe, and they began to have hot brain flashes or something and spirits talk to them, there's no need to get too upset yet, but you could check. I mean, just in case you were perhaps trying to, lay them or borrow money from them. In other words, you don't leave yet. And they say, I get visions, I can tell the future. At least you can wait a second and find out, now that I'm going to explain it to you. Whether they're having visions and trying to prognosticate the primary world or the secondary world, because they're going to try it with the primary world, then it's according to how you look at it. You're either safe or run for your life. In other words, they do not know what they're doing, because the primary world, I'll give you the only prediction, I'll give you the only safe one is, and I've already done it. The primary world changes as per its own schedule and agenda. And any human that tells you, yes, I know an earthquake's coming, which is, I don't mean scientifically they can't get it down and get better, but I mean if people say the world, the great one of course is, the world is coming to an end next, and then fill in the blank. The primary world changes The point being, in such a way that it is beyond the pale of any secondary notation, measurement, observation, and it's really of no consequence. It's only ordinary people that think it is, because that falls into then their conception of the importance of death. Because people don't really care. I know secondarily they say they can, but people do not really care about about even the primary world. People don't really care that an earthquake happens, in some faraway place like outer Mongolia or New Jersey. They don't care unless they live there, unless it has something to do with the possibility of them dying. So as far as the agenda and the schedule of the primary world, people have no real interest in it. And if you can see it in a certain way, as always, there is a kind of justice involved, and that is because the changes as they occur in the primary world, using still our arbitrary division, not ill-founded, between the primary and the secondary world, the primary and the factual world of man. Any changes that happen operate at an agenda, the reason I put it that way, at an agenda and a schedule that just, for all intents and purposes, operationally speaking, has no pertinence to you. Unless, of course, there's an earthquake and you fall into it. Then if you want to, I'll agree that it did have some pertinence to you. But do you understand? The point is, if an earthquake's going to happen, and I don't mean to be fatalistic, that's not the point, but if an earthquake's going to happen, which if it's going to be the kind of situation I just described, such as that it gobbles you up, then we're talking about death. Talking about earthquakes and catastrophes is just polite euphemisms for you're going to die. It operates as a schedule, and in a way that there is really no pertinence to an individual's life other than you dying. And if you knew the schedule, if it could be known, if there was an agenda that could be known, what the hell good would it do you? I don't see any need to go any further with this. I just want you to see that the reason I put it that way, the changes in the primary world operate as per their own schedule, their own agenda, and in a sense, as long as you are a factual civilized man, which all of you are, people, it's just beyond the pale of any importance. Although it's going to kill you, you can't do anything about it. But the factual world changes in a different way. Not only can it change, the primary world can change and does change. The secondary world, the factual world, not only can change, but for it to stay alive, for it to breathe, it must change. Whereas in your lifetime, for general, specific purposes, you could say that your primary world, very likely, will not change to a noticeable degree, assuming you're not caught up in a typhoon, an earthquake, a volcano eruption. I know you're going to die and all that crap, so don't write me. Especially if you're dying. But the point is, whatever changes might take place, let us say within this three-dimensional reality of planet Earth, whatever changes are going to take place at a primary level really have little effect on you, other than everything affects everything else. Don't write me. I told you that already. It just has no importance in your lifetime. Whatever changes are taking place on this planet, whatever changes are taking place outside your sphere, your juncture point within life, is of little importance. It's here. Once you're civilized, once you are a factually driven, once you are a secondary world person, which all of you are, here is where it's important. Change. And to say it's important is to understate it, because not only can it change here. Consider the line drawn through that I used to do with the nervous system and through the brain. From the line down, the primary world, let's call it, from my old diagram, from here down, just consider there is no change for 70 years. Whatever change happens, you don't even notice it. Not because you're dumb, you're not even supposed to notice it, it just operates at a different speed. But above the line, not only can you notice it, and not only above the line can things change drastically within your 60 or 70 years, they must bloody change. Or else this world is dying. Else you're dying. If it was a widespread kind of institutional melees of this not changing fast enough, as the tempo becomes retarded enough, then we're all in trouble. Because that is the circulation, that is the kind of breath of the secondary world, the factual world. I consider several ways that we could divide up something else. That we could say that, based on this, or jumping from here, if you can follow it, that dealing with the factual world, the secondary world, the intellectual world of man, that you could say that men could do two things in their factual world. They could think about life, that is, including all the externals, the primary world, everything that seems to be out there, which of course includes, at the ordinary level, a man's impressions of himself. You cannot separate it from that. There's an ordinary intelligence. When I say thinking about out there, that is also himself, because that is the only way he knows himself. That's the only way the intellect knows. It is the polarized energy that reflects, that resists, that you know that I'm here in the water if you're a fish. I know that I am here in this world because there's resistance. I'm constantly having to fight everything from gravity to goddamn Republicans and Baptists. It's always something. So you know you're alive. So ordinary intellect, in a sense, can either be thinking about life out there, or it could be thinking, in a strange way, it could be thinking about its own thinking. And I do not mean in the ordinary sense, because everyone would say, everyone's intelligence, everyone's ordinary mind would say, well, I do think about myself, I'm introspective and all that, and reflective, and I think about myself, and I'm self-conscious. And that's not it. I'm saying now you kind of thinking about your own thinking, but in the sense we were talking about of a revolutionist, subversive, impersonal analysis of your own thinking, which is not the norm. It is not some kind of internal reflection upon the contents of your own intellectual storehouse. If you're trying to reflect, why am I like this? Why do I have these phobias? Why do I have these fears? Why do I keep having these idées fixes about the same thing? I'll study the matter and come to some conclusion. Well, you'll study the matter and have a hobby. You'll study the matter, if you want to see it really directly, you'll study the matter and you'll die. But we're talking now about something else. That, let's say now that you're not the ordinary person, and you're not trapped into saying, well, yeah, I think about myself, and so this has no application. Let's say now that you're someone who has the potential to, the attempt, the desire, and perhaps the potential to move your thinking into some other area here, literally. Then you still have the possibility you can think about life, which is what you're supposed to be doing. Including, one more time, including at the ordinary level, that which you think is thinking about yourself and your own feelings, your own fears, your own shortcomings, your own longcomings. And it's all the same from a more complex view. So you can either be thinking about life as it is, or you could be impersonally thinking about, analyzing your own thinking. Comma. And not to drag it into a more specific area. And what I'm about to say has nothing to do with the time-honored, continuing debate, as they normally call it, the debate over the brain versus the mind, or the dichotomy of brain/mind. Those who think about life, ordinary intelligence scientists, those in neurology, psychologists, still debating, is there a difference between the brain and the thought processes? That's not what we're talking about. That's a poor reflection of what I'm about to say. But that is not it. What I wanted you to consider was this, that there is, beyond that, behind that, there is an unheralded difference between ordinary, physical, polar-based brain activity and another kind of intelligence, a non-binary intelligence. And may I repeat one more time, I am not talking about the ordinary debate and discussion over, wait a minute, Is what we think only the activities of our brain? Is the brain just another physical part of the body? And is there nothing extraordinary about the thought processes? Are they just the operations of the organ of the brain? Not that. That is just the childish, that is the limited reality reflection of what I'm trying to get you to see. So one more time, it's not that. And I'm using about the same word, so just don't choke on it. There is a difference, which brings about this so-called debate. But there is a difference between the ordinary, physical, polar-based, which should go without saying, that's the only way the energy operates, but the polar-based activity of the brain organ is one thing. All of this kind of stuff is something else. It's not separate from the brain. You don't suddenly begin to think in some kind of secondary metaphysical body over here, or your thinking processes do not move into your knees or your elbows. But it is a thinking, it is an intelligence that is no longer polar-based, and it is no longer limited to, it is no longer solely arising from the brain organ activities. Now, it's still going there. I repeat it one more time. It doesn't slide down to your armpit or go into your ears, but it is not part of the ordinary physical, as we know it ordinarily, operations of the brain organ. It is something else. It's the same thing, see, but it's something else. Which is why they have the debate. The great debate over the question, or the question over the possible dichotomy or lack thereof between the human brain and the human mind. Sensing a certain, perhaps confusion, uncertainty on the part of our viewing audience, how about think about it this way? Consider that there is a distinction between the normal, ordinary activities of the brain organ and then this something else, this unnecessary, this kind of non-polar based thinking. And then consider the distinction, simply put, if it could be, that the normal neural activities of the brain are almost like a defense. It is almost like self-protection to live in the primary world. It is like almost physical gymnastics in and of a three-dimensional primary world that makes it possible to defend oneself on this planet, that protects one for 60 or 70 years in this life. Let's assume that you would agree that everyone would have their hands full right now if we could in some way strip away the secondary world and drop you into a primary world. Not just you personally, but anybody. It would be hard going for you to survive. That's not the point, and don't tell me that you've taken survival training. You're missing the idea. Let's turn it. What if we could strip you of all of your sophistication, all of your civilization? What if we could strip you of your connection to the factual world? What if we could strip you of your factual world in here? And not forget dropping you over on some strange atoll in the South Pacific. Now we drop you back in Fort Lee, New Jersey, Las Vegas. We drop you into the factual world, which would be worse nowadays. It's not the point. But to take a civilized man and drop him into the feral jungles of some remote area, or to take someone from that area and drop them into Albany or Buffalo, New York. The intellect, the secondary world of man, the factual world, acts at its basic level in the brain as almost self-protection. But this other intelligence, what this kind of stuff's about, goes beyond a defensive And I'll admit, it needs to go in serious quotation marks, but I'm trying to get you looking a certain way. Rather than the ordinary operations of the brain being man's greatest defensive mechanism, which you easily could say at a crude level, it is that makes man be able, that he could still get out and compete or at least survive in the wilds of India against tigers or in the wilds of Africa against lions, not because he's stronger, not because he's faster and blah, blah, but because of this, that he can defend himself on this planet, but inside the dimensions of this 3D existence, that his greatest weapon, defensive in quotation marks, but to get you to look in a certain way, to keep him going for 60 or 7 years, what is his greatest weapon? The brain. The ordinary operations of the brain. Just everybody's ordinary operations. But then this other that I was attempting to hint at, of a kind of non-polarized neural activity that is not, or that can be distinguished from normal brain organ activity, as opposed to it being primarily a defensive activity for self-protection, could be looked at more as an offensive weapon for development. That it's not just the kind of protection as man stumbles through life, it is like a new kind of offensive possibility that he can explore, rather than the ordinary operations of the brain organ being like his armed guards, or like being the sturdy ships upon which Columbus and his ilk sailed. It would be then like getting somewhere to a new area, to a new land, and then a new kind of intelligence take over, that you're not worried about protection, you're not worried about survival, you're worried about, hey, let's explore. It's not necessary. All Columbus had to do was get to a certain place and go back and, show him a brick or something. The Queen would go, good boy. That's why you save your ass. If you don't believe that, check with Sir Walter Raleigh. And he's not in a can. He's in trouble. Well, I'm speaking for Elizabeth, but she said the boy had it. This other kind of intelligence, vis-a-vis the brain being the great defensive weapon, the great steering mechanism for ordinary existence, for everybody from explorers to scientists, religious leaders, painters. In life, your greatest defensive weapon, your greatest stabilizer, the rudder in life, is the ordinary operations of the brain, no matter how smart you are, no matter your IQ, your education. That is the operations of the brain organ, as it should be. But there is another kind of intelligence that ordinary people could hear this, ordinary brains, and say, well, that is what scientists are after. That is what thinkers and philosophers. I know they can say that. But it is not real exploration if you've got any preference. It's not real exploration if you've got any expectations. You can't even get a grant back in the ordinary world. And don't everybody write me, because there's somebody around giving out money now that says, do whatever you want to. But you still can't. The ordinary intellect cannot explore in this subversive sense as long as it is self-referring, as long as it is still self-centered, which it's got to be, in which it is still self-protective, which it's got to be. Because no philosopher at the ordinary level, we're not talking about individual other men now, we're talking about individual reflections of the greater nervous system that oozes out in individual man. But an individual man, an intellect anywhere, no matter how theoretical it may seem, no matter how vague, no matter how broad-minded, no matter how liberal, no matter how avant-garde may seem to be its field, physics, theoretical cosmology, it is still not free exploration. As long as you can get whoever it is to tell what kind of guy they are, trust me. I mean, as long as you tell the guy, hey, you're nuts. What do you mean I'm nuts? You have no freedom. Nothing wrong with that is it. That is the normal operations of the brain organ. That is not this kind of new intelligence. That is not an intelligence that is not polar-based. There's a little bit in the Kairoot tonight that may or may not help. But you could look upon anything that we've been calling new intelligence as subversive thinking, or being able to think without it being limited to polar energy, polar-based energy. You could look upon new intelligence as a force instead of intelligence. And I'm not insinuating anything of any great mystical value now, but instead of just calling this intelligence, you could look at it as a force. But then you need to put at least a comma, and let me finish. That look upon it as a new force. Okay. But now wait a minute, put a comma. Look upon it as a new force made dimensional. Now if you insist, you can at least put a semicolon. For your children watching at home, go ahead and put a period. It is a new force made dimensional. It is that which is irrelevant. It is that which is impertinent. All such words which are misnomers. It is that which has no full significance, no full appearance here, pulled in. Not that you can do it. That's the dreams of Hollywood and the human intellect, in some way of pulling in, beam me down, Scotty, or whatever the hell it is, of trying to pull in that which doesn't exist. These strange figures, these super figures either on other planets or gods and spirits somewhere, and drag them in. That again is a childish reflection of this. That you are pulling in force. You are pulling in activities of the nervous system, which in essence amount to that which is outside the dimensions of this reality. Not science fiction, but just outside the limits of 3D reality. And you personally are attempting to pull in a new force. It's not really new information. Not in the sense that there's some verbal secret, or that there, if we could get into the fourth or fifth dimension, there's some sentences there that, boy, I'm getting good enough now, I'm getting up to date. I no longer believe that they're hiding the secret book over in Tibet. Ha! I believed that when I was a child and taking childish drugs. Now I'm older, now I've got better drugs, and plus I've listened to this kind of stuff, and I've been reading science fiction, and I still believe there is this kind of verbal or intellectual holy grail, but it's not hidden somewhere in Abbey in Wales. It's no longer, I don't believe it's in China. What men's been seeking, because now I can think metaphorical. Of course, whoever's saying this, I hope they didn't hear that Kairoot tonight about the royal soothsayer and his great admission under imbibling too much of the truth juice. But somebody could say, I no longer believe all that childish stuff. This great truth, I know what it is. It is. It's like we're a three-dimensional sphere, reality. We're in this greater reality, and the truth is just out of reach. That's it. That's it. It's it, except it's not a matter of truth. See, they're still in the same boat if they're going to do that. They still think, wait a minute, there's this secret somewhere. No, it is. It's a secret that's written down here. They believe that there is a factual secret. There is no factual secret. The only way that the factual world exists here, and if we were talking about it, if we were in a five-dimensional reality and they had their own version of a factual reality, it would be the same thing, a factual world. The only way it exists is because there is no, finally, the secret. If you found, if there was such thing, it was finally the secret, what it would say, you'd look down and it'd go, that's all, folks. It'd be, boom, it'd be a mushroom cloud. It would be fini. It would say, don't bother to tune in next time because there is no next time. There is no, what they're looking for, the solid thing, the factual secret. I've already told you the factual secret is this, is the factual secrets, the factual world can change. Semicolon, or comma. The factual world must change. So it's not that we're not talking about, if you followed any of that there is a secret. When I say making a new force dimensional, it's not dragging in some kind of information. It's when I said I started this, they're changing it for the time being. Instead of information or knowledge, it's really force. Because it's nothing specific. It's not, well, if I keep fooling around with this kind of stuff, I'm going to learn the secret. No. I don't give everybody the blues. All right, maybe you can. But it's not the secret. Oh, If that gives you the blues, maybe I'm wrong. Don't worry about it. It's not the secret. It's additional energy. It's additional force. And one more time, I don't mean anything spooky, that you get all kinds of additional energy and you can now fly through the air and walk through the water and never be audited by the RS. It's not that kind of miracle. It's your dragging force. That is, you're igniting your own nervous system, your own ability to perceive and think in a factual way here. You're dragging in new force and making it dimensional. That is, you're making your own brain work in ways that previously brains did not work. But it's not because, well, wait, if I get more information, my brain will get bigger. No, it won't. Or if I get more information, my intelligence will get bigger. No, it won't. You got to have new force, new energy. You got to make it dimensional. Because it's not here. There's nothing here else to find. The factual world is made up. If I may quote Kairos from a few nights ago, the factual world is composed of questions, not answers. That's not a flip truism. It's a fact. And of course, men have to, that is, the factual world of man has to think otherwise. It has to operate on the assumption. It's got no choice. But it does operate on the assumption that we can come to some conclusions. In fact, given the right circumstances, and those who are more religious, given the right conditions, we will come to the unified theory. We will come to paradise. We will come to the grand conclusion. That is not the nature of it. But the nature of the factual world of man is that, boy, am I curious. Boy, would I like to think. Boy, I want to know how things work. That's right. And if you say, well, do you understand that the world is composed of that kind of curiosity, that kind of intellectual itch? That, in other words, questions, it's not composed of answers. Now, an ordinary intellect would take that as being, without any doubt, the best it could make is, well, that is interesting, and metaphorically, I see what you mean. Screw metaphorically. But they can say, well, we do have answers. In fact, we're getting more and more answers. In fact, the serious questions, scientific questions, psychological questions, we keep narrowing it down. We get closer and closer. You got to see that's not true. It's not they're wrong. They're supposed to think that. You think that at the ordinary level. But that is not the factual world. There is no answers in the factual world. Anytime there's an answer in the factual world, there was a death. If it was actually some kind of shared conclusion, or if it's just your conclusion, then in a sense you had one part of the operations of your brain organ died. Ah, now I see what's going on. You know it's the truth. You just don't know that you know it's the truth. Because once you understand something, what do? Well, I forget about it. Right. It's as though you don't have to worry about alcohol and the non-rejuvenation of brain cells. All you got to do is as ordinary intellect would have it, wait a minute. It is possible in the factual world to come to conclusions, to actually know something, to get an answer. It's not all questions. I do have an answer. I finally, to my satisfaction, answered this question. All right, what you did, in a sense, was that brain cell went. It's not theory. It's just useless information. Because everybody knows this. They just don't know they know it. And I just proved it to you. Because once you understand something, what do? Well, what do you mean? Well, once you understand something, then how often do you think about it? And well, once I understand, I always think about it. Gunther Gable-Williams told me that move since, well, he actually gave it to me since he was retiring. That don't help. Once you understand something, you what? Well, hell, I quit worrying about it. I give it a decent, although you don't, I give it a decent burial. The factual world is composed of questions, no answers, unless you consider answers, unless you consider cemeteries, which they are, an integral part of the landscape. But other than that, that is not part of the living world, as far as you can see through your five senses. Anytime there are answers in the factual world, they're cemeteries. Because that is not the nature of the factual world. The factual world, to stay alive, has got to change. Jesus. Again, can we push 4 minutes or not? All right, here we go. I was going to drag out one more. There was another Kairos recently. There were several that point out that the young never worry about being swindled by their contemporaries, only about by being swindled by the old. And then a night or so later, another Kairos pointed out that it is only the old that can swindle the young. But now, right quick, notice out here, as always, to go out here where you think life is sane and reasonable. I'll go along with it. Young people, the young never concern themselves over any noticeable degree. It is not newsworthy, it is not institutional. They do not worry about being cheated, swindled, robbed by their peers, their contemporaries. When they know that they're surrounded by small-time hoods, swindlers, they're going to grow up, they already got the talent. But the young never worry about that. They worry about swindled by the old. Rightly so. It is part of the job of the old to try and cheat the young. Try and cheat them out of change. It is part of the old job, old ideas, is to try, it is the protective mechanism, part of the balance, to protect what is normally referred to as the status quo. Their job, the older you get, as soon as you begin to find, back out here at an ordinary observable level, as soon as you begin to find, it doesn't matter what age you are, as soon as you turn around and somebody, at least a little younger than you go, God Almighty. Look at the hair, listen to that music, listen to those ideas, look at their morals, whatever the hell it is, you're now old compared to somebody. Everybody's an old man to somebody. Everybody's a kid to somebody, except everybody that's almost alive and breathing. But we'll go to that some other time. You are old. It is the job of the old to attempt to swindle the young, but swindle in a certain way, to try and cheat them out of change. That's always the nature of it. And the young, the kids, always, rightfully, distrust the old. They're old man. Everybody's old man. And they don't really know why. I know they can verbalize it. They try and pick holes upon the current political situation, blah, blah, blah. Give me some good news. Give me some brand new news. It is the job of the old, of old ideas, to try and to cheat the young out of change, to keep things stable, to create a kind of semblance of certainty. And there was another one that drew widespread nonplusness here several nights ago that pointed out a Kairos that said the rich are always guilty. And it also pointed out that you are a part of that group of dunderheads that either do or do not get together. If you thought that that's referred to fiscal matters, you could look upon the rich as being the old, because they are full of their established ideas. They're not about to lose the ideas. It's the young that feel like things are in such a state of change in me that change should be made out here. Things are too entrenched out here, and always, from their view, in a negative way, that things should be improved. And from their view, they're correct. It is only the old that are rich. They are fat. They are full of themselves. They're full of the established ideas. They're full of their factual world. And it's not going to change. And so they're always guilty. Back out again one more time. Out in the street. As ridiculous as it is if you was really a revolutionist in the sense we use it, but as useless as it would be to a would-be revolutionist, be out there in the streets with his Molotov cocktails and attacking the barricades and trying to take over the universities, that's a reflection of something real. Of them hollering out, down with the administration, or we are being led by narrow-minded people. Yeah, it's all true. That's their job, to try and cheat, to take away the birthright of the young. And now we're not talking about people, of course, but it's to cheat life, the C-force, to cheat one of the dimensions of a three-dimensional world from, wait a minute, things are not so bad. Hell, I was going crazy. It took me 15 or 20 years to finally pull myself together. And now I finally settled down, got a house, had a wife, had some sex for a while, and my hormones are wearing out, and I don't really care now. And now these damn people, these kids come along playing that loud music, dressing worse than we ever did. I mean, hell, I was bad enough. I almost drove myself crazy, and now they're doing that. What they're saying is, Jesus, give me a break. What it is the three dimensions of life, the machinery of a three-dimensional universe, of the desire to change, the C-force, the D-force resisting, and then the E-pool of all of the possible change that's going to occur. It is the job of the old to attempt to cheat the young. And the young are always well within their rights. It is the proper situation for them to always fear, I'm going to be swindled. You're damn right. Now forget all that and look in here. Every time you try to change your mind, what happens? Every time you hear an idea, you hear an idea from some strange place. I won't take that personally. And you even think, hey, Jesus, for a second that almost got me. That could make sense. And then something seems to well up in you. You know, common sense, reason, logic. What you're doing is like your whole birthright. It's not a struggle between you and me, but it's as though the old in you go, wait a minute. And it has its own variations. It does not use my kind of terms. That's why I use these kind of terms and descriptions. But the old, you've got your whole life already invested. You're rich. I mean, Jesus, it's a miracle, some of you would say, if I'd let you tell me what kind of guy you are. Boy, that'd be interesting. To say, well, boy, you don't know. I went through all my life and I meditated and I starved myself and I took drugs and I just barely got to the point that I'm stable and sane enough to be able to listen to you and think about weird stuff. You don't hear it? You're still telling what kind of guy you are. You're rich. You're old. Everybody's ideas are old. And they will attempt to swindle you. It's their job to cheat you. Hey, come on. Gee, hey, look, we went through enough of this stuff when we were young. We just barely, it's a miracle I'm this age. Now, I don't mind thinking a few strange thoughts. Now, I'll go see a science fiction movie. But, you know, come on. The young rightfully fear being swindled by the old because it's the old's job. But remember, we're talking about old ideas. And the rich are always guilty and hated. Why? Because they're always old. Well, we got any left? Well, one sentence? Well, it's too late if I'm going to keep asking. Well, I'm going to say it would be the revolutionist. The neural revolution must always be young. If not, as per that great Atlanta philosophical committee, known as the Towns, to be young, if not, be young and foolish. But it's the revolutionists. Whew. I wasted the last minute on the tape to get that in. It is the revolution. A neural revolutionist has got to stay young. Now you can fade out. I'm already done for. Was I talking to no one? Talking to the ethers.